Have you ever wondered if you could map out a market's path using just geometry? Well, today we're going to explore a really unique method called market DNA. And we're going to use a specific Bitcoin cycle to walk through it, step by step. So let's dive right in. At its heart, market DNA is what's called a proprietary geometric system. The most important thing to get your head around is that it's designed to be totally self-contained. It plays by its own set of rules, completely separate from any kind of traditional market analysis you might be used to. So here's our game plan. First, we'll define what the market DNA method actually is. Then we'll jump into that specific Bitcoin cycle blueprint and walk through its four-phase path. After that, we'll look at the risk and return scenarios, and finally, we'll wrap up with the super important terms and conditions. All right, first up, the market DNA method. Let's really get into what makes this approach stand apart from pretty much everything else out there. Okay, so as we said, according to the source, market DNA is a proprietary geometric system. But what really defines it is everything it doesn't use. There's no technical analysis, no fundamental analysis. It doesn't use quantitative indicators, Fibonacci ratios, or Elliott waves. It even ignores things like chart patterns and trend lines. It's like it's working from a completely different playbook. So let's put this into practice with our case study. What we're looking at here is a Bitcoin cycle blueprint, and it's labeled BTC_2_1. And for the record, this data was all documented as of January 31st, 2026. Here we go. This is the initial setup for phase one of this cycle, which is defined simply as the entry phase. As you can see, the model's geometric structure is laid right over the price chart. It's all right there. Now, within this entry phase, the model points out two key levels. The primary entry, which is labeled M, is set right at $82,671.07. Then you've got a secondary entry, PC, at $73,833.30. Now, what's crucial to remember is that both of these levels are considered part of this phase one setup. Now, the model also defines some very specific parameters for managing risk. You can see we have a trapezoid time duration of 38 days and a third triangle domain of 30.44%. The risk coefficient is set to 1. All of these inputs are used to calculate a mean entry price of $78,252.18. You can think of these as the unique operational rules for this specific cycle. So, you might be asking, how does this entry phase fit into the bigger picture? Well, the system lays out a predefined four-phase path. And for this particular cycle, BTC_2_1, it's projected to follow what the model calls a normal sequence. And here is that predefined map, laid out for us nice and clear. It all starts with phase one, the entry, which we just covered. Step 2 is phase 2, a mirror contact event. Then comes phase 3, an end-level event. And finally, the cycle wraps up with phase 4, which is completion at the trapezoid top. So, what does this all mean in practice? Let's get into it. This next part breaks down the calculated risk and the potential return scenarios, all based on those geometric parameters that we just saw. To make this all feel a bit more real, the analysis uses a hypothetical. It starts with an assumed capital of $100,000. And, critically, it sets a maximum allowed drawdown of 5%, or $5,000. Okay, so using those inputs, the $100,000 in capital and that $5,000 max drawdown, the model calculates a very specific position size. The total size comes out to 0.20991. And since there are those two potential entry points we talked about, that gets split into two trades, each sized at 0.1049. Now, the source material is very, very specific about how these sizes are determined. So I'm just going to read this next part directly from the source. Both trade sizes are calculated using the hypothetical capital, the investor's maximum allowed drawdown, the third triangle domain percentage, the risk coefficient, and the contract size. So as you can hear, it's a very strict formula-based approach. All of this leads to two potential return scenarios outlined in the documentation. In scenario 1, there's a single entry at M with an exit at target 3. This projects an expected total profit of $2,486, which comes out to a 14.31% expected annual return. Then you have scenario 2, which assumes entries at both M and PC with different exit targets. That one results in an expected total profit of $4,740, or a 26.32% expected annual return. And finally, we have to cover the terms and conditions. These are really important disclaimers that give some much-needed context for this entire analysis. So the source provides several mandatory disclaimers. First and foremost, this is not financial advice. This analysis is purely for documentation and public verification purposes. The source also states that you should not invest essential personal funds, that leverage above 10 is prohibited, and that any risk management has to precisely follow the plan's instructions. So there you have it. We've just walked through a visual documentation of one market DNA cycle. It's a system built entirely on predefined geometric shapes and phases, operating completely outside of traditional analysis. If you'd like more information from the source, you can visit marketdnaedge.com. It all leaves you with a really interesting question. What does it mean to map a market's potential path, not by trying to predict it, but by simply following a geometric blueprint?